Alright, welcome to the Source Garage CycloShine 3.0 assembly video. All the parts I have here on the table right now are for the fixed frame. If you have the spinning base, check the timestamps below and you can jump to that part where I go through that assembly. Also check the timestamps if you have questions on just a specific portion. I'll be labeling all the sections as I go through them and discussing any tips and tricks of the assembly as well. So, without further ado, let's get right into it. I have everything laid out here right now and a couple extra parts as well. But some of this is pre-assembled because it makes it easier to explain and it can save some time here so you don't have to spend so much time watching the video. So obviously you'll get all your parts, they come wrapped up in this nice little plastic to protect them during transit. So unwrap everything, lay it out, get it all in front of you. You should have all these packages right that have labels, so if you bought the extension or vertical rollers, you'll have your support arm and your base frame package. So you'll have all of those with you and I'll explain which ones I'm using when I go through each portion. So let me move these out of the way for right now. So we're going to start with the frame assembly and we're going to start with the base, which I've already kind of pre-assembled here because it makes it a little bit easier to explain the layout. And also you should have the kind of 3D models and diagrams of the exploded out view so you can look at those as well to understand kind of what's going on here. So to start with the frame, I've got 3 of the casters in it and I just wanted to do this so I can show you the orientation here. Alright, so these 2 holes that go on the outside here are kind of your points of reference for both of these bars. And if you see some wear marks on here, these because these are the from the pre-assembled demo stand I already had together. But the top hole here, this will be the front 1 center hole, and the 2 on the top where the rear arm bracket will go, obviously this is going to be the rear. So when you piece together the top layout, it should look just like this. Take a second look at the hole alignment. And then I'll go over putting in a furniture foot or a caster. So the feet come with one of these nuts on them already. And so what we can do is take one of these washers, put it on here, to screw it down a bit to make space because it's got to go through the bar. And then we'll put it through the bottom hole and put it through the top bracket there. And turn it down a little bit more here. Put a washer on top and then screw the acorn nut on top and tighten it down. Now that's for the feet. I already had put casters on this one, so I'm going to do it with casters. So the casters, you may not be able to fit a washer on the bottom here because the stem is a little short. Unfortunately, part of the manufacturing, I couldn't get a much longer stem without an extremely high cost added to this. So I just put a washer on top after feeding the caster through, put the acorn on top, and tighten down. And this, I should have mentioned this at the beginning, is a 17 millimeter. You have 17 millimeter ratchet, tighten that down, and then now we have our base from which we can more easily assemble everything else. So the first thing I would put on here is the nameplate. So nameplate, you'll have obviously 2 bolts that go through it, and there's a washer on the back of each of these to make it stand off from the frame a little bit. And these parts will be from, again, your frame kit here. So put the bolts through, put a washer on the back of each, feed them through the front of the frame. And then take just a washer and a nut onto the back of each of these. All right, now we have the nameplate on the front. So again, this should all be with the frame kit. Okay, now we're gonna start putting the brackets on that go with the rollers, and we're still using parts from the frame kit here. So because these rollers do not have spring-loaded shafts that would normally compress like I had in the 2.0 model, Unfortunately, the manufacturer screwed that up. They are not spring-loaded, so they are solid shafts, so we have to do something a little bit different with the brackets here, but not a problem. So the way these are installed, and I'm going to actually start with the rear brackets here. So I'm going to take bolts, nut, washer from the frame kit. I would recommend feeding them in through the bottom here so they don't interfere with the caster that moves around. So you can feed those two in through the bottom, put the bracket on top, washer, washer, nut, nut. We're going to do the two back ones first. All right, now let's do the front ones, and I'll show you the trick to putting the rollers in. So with the front ones, to start with, we're only going to install one of the two bolts, and I'll show you why here. So feed up from the bottom, one bolt. And don't tighten this down, leave it loose still. Once you have the one bolt in and the bracket can pivot on that, you're going to take your tiny washer, put it on the back of the roller. This is going to be the back end. We're going to feed that into the rear bracket, into the lower hole, and then we're going to pivot the bracket into the top hole here, the shaft into the top hole of the bracket. And then we can feed the last bolt in and then tighten this all down. And again, that's because unfortunately the manufacturer screwed up and did not give me spring-loaded shafts. They are straight, solid shafts. So unfortunately, just only way to deal with this. So if you want to drop the rollers in parallel, you'll have to loosen these up, drop it down, retighten them. Not a big deal, but just a little inconvenience, which didn't have to deal with. And then we'll do the same thing for the other ones. So take the roller, plastic on, and repeat. All right, now we have the base complete here. So you got the base with the casters on, with the nameplate. And now we're going to take a look at the support arm. So for just a second, I'm going to set this to the side here, and we're going to talk about the top. So here's obviously a very long top support piece and our handle at the top here. Also, obviously you'll have this bracket, as well as a smaller bracket and a larger bracket here for the rollers. So going to start here with the smaller bracket. So we're going to take 2 of the 1 1/4 bolts, just like we had before, 2 washers, 2 nuts, and this will be all out of your support bag. I use a lot of the same parts, so if you have these all just laid out, it's not really a problem. I'm going to take these, hold them in here. Washer, washer, and then just make sure you square it up. All right, bracket there. Oh, and before I go any further, shouldn't forget these plastic caps that you have here go in each end of the top piece here and in the ends of your frame. So I didn't put this one in so I could demonstrate. You can really just set these in and whack them with literally anything or press down on them. You can use a hammer, you can just press them into the table. So I'll give an example here. If I put this down here and then just press, and there you go, completely flat pushed into the end, no problem. So, like I said, 4 of those, 2 in here, 2 in here to plug the ends up and give it just a cleaner finish. Anyway, back to the brackets. So we got our lower one in here. This middle one here is for if you use the, if you have the extension piece ordered separately, your lower bracket will go into here because your upper bracket will mount in the extension. That's how we raise the roller up more. So do not use this middle one if you don't have the extension. We're going to use the lower of the top 2 for this larger bracket here. The top bracket, we're going to have to do something similar for the roller as we did on the bottom. So I'm going to start by putting these in, and I'm going to leave them kind of loose, and I'll show you what I mean. Feed those through. All right, so I've left the top bracket a little loose here. And the reason for that is, again, because these rollers are not spring-loaded, we're going to take our last little plastic washer here, feed it on the bottom roller, or the part of the roller we're going to put in. You can put it on either side. We're going to feed the bottom part of the roller into this hole here. And then for the top, you're going to have to bend the bracket up a little bit while it's loose to get the roller in, and then tighten down these nuts on this bracket to then hold it in place. And just make sure you square it up. And tighten down. So now your roller is in the 2 brackets with the plastic washer on the bottom part here. And now we'll put in the top with you've already got your 2 plastic pieces on. Take 2 of the longer screws. These are 2 1/4 inches, if I remember right. Feed those through, and then washer nut, washer nut. All right, now you have your entire top design complete here, and now we need to attach it to the base. And I'm gonna set this down here, turn this around. So this hinge, you can kind of do this 2 different ways, really your preference. You can either attach the hinge to the base first, or attach the hinge, or sorry, not to the base, attach the hinge to the support arm or to the base and then mount it. Either way, it doesn't matter, whatever your preference is, they still have to go through the same 4 holes in the hinge. I'm gonna do it to the base here. So get 1 1/4 inch bolts. Feed these through here, put that on top. You could feed these bolts through either way if you wanted it to look different, doesn't really matter. Tighten it down. And then what's going to happen is this longer bolt here is going to feed through the bottom here, right? And it's going to go through the support once we line it up here. And we're going to have 2 bolts through the hinge that connect to support as well. So you're going to have 3 points here that'll go through. We got to pull this one out to start with. Can pick up our support arm, line up the 2 holes here. Get those through. Then I typically lean forward a bit just to hold it with my head here. Get those kind of loosely on, We straighten it upright, feed our bottom bolt through. Nut and washer on everything. Hand tighten it all up. And there you have it. Here is the entire frame attached. Remember this bottom bolt here, actually I'll just do a quick demonstration. If you want to collapse the frame, you just undo the very bottom bolt here. Take this out, fold it down, grab that bolt, feed it through the front here. And then washer and nut onto here if you want it to hang it up on the wall then. Now, one thing I definitely want to call out here is due to just the manufacturing tolerances here and the size of these holes, if your bolt here does not come up right through the middle of this back piece here, what you're going to want to do is loosen up your four corners of the base of your frame and push them in together, which will shorten the length of the frame so that the bolt hole can come up through here more easily. Again, it's just a little bit of a manufacturing oversight, I guess, or the tolerance is not coming out as I expected them, that this hole can be a bit of a tighter fit than planned. But if you push the frame together, it'll shorten that distance just enough to get the bolt through here smoothly. But anyway, it'll go through now just fine. All right, now let's talk about the vertical rollers. So if you ordered them, you will get these two rollers obviously here, and these two 250 millimeter threaded rods, and a kit labeled Vert for vertical rollers. And what will be in here is basically everything you see on the rods right now. So you will get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these 10 millimeter nuts on each of these, so you'll have 10 total, as well as 1, 2, 3, 4 10 millimeter washers. So on each of these you'll have this exact setup. So you're going to go nut, washer, washer, nut. This is what's going to attach to the bottom here. So you'll have a washer and nut on each side. You'll use these two nuts here to lock in below where the roller is going to go, and then you'll have a roller and washer on the top just to cap it off. So I've kind of got it pre-assembled from the kit here. Give you a closer look here. I'll let any of this roll away from me. So again, nut, washer, roller, washer, nut, 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 washer, washer, nut is going to be the order here. So on the bottom here, I'm going to take off this nut, take off one washer, simply feeds through this hole, washer on the bottom, and a nut, and tighten down. And then you want this roller to be able to spin spin freely, so you can loosen the nut on the top here to whatever you need to make this happen. I'll do the same here for this one. There you go, 2 vertical rollers spinning freely to help keep your tire on the stand. So that covers the vertical rollers. Okay, the bottom here, I'm not actually going to disassemble this because it's pretty self-explanatory. This frame piece for the extension is just a replacement for the hinge. So there's 2 bolts on the bottom, you got 2 bolts on the bottom here, 2 bolts on the back, 2 bolts on the back here. So pretty much just copy what I did with the bracket or the hinge here for this bracket, stick it on the bottom, and obviously it won't bend or flex in any way. You will also need a 10mm wrench. Because the bracket sits so far back on this lower frame piece here, you can't generally fit a socket over top, so you'll need a 10mm wrench to tighten it down. But yeah, just 4 bolts, 2 in the top, 2 in the bottom. That's it. Now on to the top part with the actual extension piece. All right, so the next thing I want to cover here is the extension piece that you can add on top of your rear support arm here and the support piece at the bottom, although this is a lot simpler to explain than the top here. So let me undo what I just did here. All right, so the first thing I've already gone ahead and done here is taking the shorter bracket and moving it up from the 2 holes down here where it initially I had installed it for the standard frame up to the middle of the rear support arm here using the exact same bolts. So you can use the bolts that are already on the frame just to move this shorter bracket up to the middle here. Then with the extension, so we're going to take this and these 2 holes are going to become these new top 2 holes for your other bracket and T-handle further up. These lower 2 holes are going to go in the very top 2 here. So I'm going to slide this on, and it's probably going to be a tight fit. Shimmy it down into place. And then you can take 2 of the regular bolts that you are using for the upper bracket. Do not use the bolts from the extension kit just yet. And we're going to use those to attach this. And then just washer and nut in place on the back here. All right, so that's going to hold this in place. It may wiggle a little bit. It's just like a sleeve over the top, so if it wiggles a bit, it's not a problem. It's not going to impact your ability to use any of this. For the bracket on the upper part, we're going to have to use the slightly longer bolts that come in the extension kit because the sleeve is now wider, plus we're going through the bracket as well. And we're going to have to leave it a little bit loose to get the roller in, just like we did with the base. So washer and nut on the back of both of these. Just feed that in. And again, leave it loose to start with. So now we take our little plastic roller piece, put it on the lower part that you're going to insert here. And then because we left the top bracket loose, we now can slide it over the roller and then tighten this down. So now we've got our roller and our bracket here. And really, you could be done here if you wanted to. If you would like to put on the top handle still, I have included washers and nuts with 2 extra long bolts to go through the top here. To install this as well. And there will not be a plastic cap on the top of this part. So the top will be open here. But that's the extension on the top here. So obviously the roller is moved up quite a bit. All right, this is the spinning base assembly video. So I'm going to be walking through obviously the spinning base assembly. You will get a fastener kit labeled spin like this that has all the parts that I've kind of got strewn around here, as well as some other stuff like the feet. These rubber spacers, your rollers, and your color choice. The tools you're going to need here, so a 10mm for the smaller nuts, a 13mm for some of the spinning base parts here, and a 17mm socket or wrench also works for the larger bolts that are on the feet here that we're going to be installing. So, let me get, all right. So to start here, we've got the top plate, the bottom plate, and our spinning Lazy Susan here assembly. So the best way to actually do this is to start with your top plate on the ground here. And what we're going to do is have these spacers where we're going to set the Lazy Susan on and we're going to bolt it through. So what I do, take the bolts on a table here. I'm going to feed these through and then lower the plate a little bit. And then get the back bolts. All right, so now I've got my bolts sticking through. These are, there's 3 different kinds of bolts you're gonna see in here. So I've got these little tiny ones, which are gonna be for the brackets up top. These short stubby ones, which will be the connectors for the base plate to this. So these bolts are gonna be the slightly longer ones, or the longest of the 3 you'll see in here. Because these should fit over top here like so. And then take your Lazy Susan and we're going to place it on top. And it should feed through these 4 holes here. Now, your Susan will probably come like this, so you'll just have to rotate it to a diamond like this, and it'll make the assembly easier. And I'll scoot this up here so you can get a better visual. And then we're going to take washer and nut. Tighten all this down. These all use my 13 millimeter. You can grab a socket with a wrench, tighten them further if you want to. I'm just hand tightening them for now for the assembly demonstration. So now we should have our top plate assembled to the spinner here. And now the next part, and the reason for the spacers on here is so we have enough room to actually assemble the next portion here. So now our top plate will go on at an angle here, and you're going to want to line up the holes in the top part of the Susan so that you can see through them all. So like I said, it'll be on an angle here. Then you're going to take the shorter but kind of thicker bolts of the 2 you have left. You're going to reach under here with your hand, feed those through, washer, nut, and do that for all 4 of them. All right, now we have our other piece on here, which should rotate smoothly like so. And these feet come standard, the furniture feet. If you do have casters, let me grab my other assembled one. You will have these white spacers I'm pointing at right here that'll go in between your casters and the corner here so it doesn't stick up too far and hit anything. So it looks like that. But they are assembled the same way. So take your feet, washer on, then you'll have another washer and nut. Remember, this is the bottom, so we're going to stick them through, screw that nut down like so, and make sure that it's not sticking up too far. I'm going to go around and do these for all 4 corners here. All right, now you have all your feet and your Lazy Susan together. Flip it over. You can tighten down the feet if you need to anymore, but now we've got our top rotating assembly here. Now we can start with the rollers. So there's a little bit of a trick with the rollers because they are not spring-loaded shafts. There's unfortunately a screw up with the manufacturer, and they're fixed shafts. So anyway, we'll start with put both brackets in on one side first. So just bracket on the outside corner, 2 of your remaining bolts left, washer, washer, nut, nut, and go around and do that on all, or on just 2 sides to start with. Or on the same side, 2 brackets, sorry. All right, so once you've got 2 brackets on one side, rotate this around here. Now, because of the issue with the shafts I mentioned earlier, I'm going to start by just putting in 1 bracket, or one bolt, and leave it loose. So it should be able to pivot and spin around like this with 1 in. Then we're going to take our roller. You can do the top or bottom hole in the bracket, doesn't matter, your preference. I'm going to use the bottom here, and then we're going to pivot the bracket onto the roller shaft. If you bolt down the shaft, the roller will not fit in, or if you bolt down the bracket, the roller won't fit in. So we have to pivot the shaft into the bracket, and then we can bolt it down. And your roller will never come out of the bracket. Although if you want to raise it up or angle it for any reason, you then just have to loosen the bracket back up to get it back out and then retighten it. So there you go, roller's in place now, and I'm gonna do the other one. And that is it. Here's your completed spinning base assembly. Should move relatively quietly and very smoothly and stop without continuing to spin because of the friction in the Lazy Susan. All right, that's it for this. And if you ordered the support arm, keep watching and I'll explain how that goes on here. Or if you've ordered the vertical rollers, I'll cover that too. All right, so if you ordered the vertical roller add-ons, there's 2 holes here next to the brackets on either side, so you could assemble these on either side of the frame you wanted to. And this is what the assembly will look like. So you'll get 2 nylon rollers, 2 of these shafts, and a kit labeled Vert for vertical rollers that'll have all the nuts and washers in here. And just to explain to you what the assembly looks like, it's going to go nut, washer, washer, nut. This is the part that's going to attach to the frame. And then the upper part will be nut, nut, washer, nylon roller, washer, nut. And this will be the top. So you'll simply take everything out of your vertical packet, install it just like I pointed out onto the shaft here, stick through, put a washer on, and a nut. Ta-da, that's it. And your vertical roller should spin freely, so adjust the nuts and washers as you need to make it look like this, and you can adjust the height up and down, obviously, by adjusting the nuts on the bottom here. And of course, there's one last feature I forgot to overlook, of course, and that is the nameplate here. So the nameplate, we're going to feed the remaining small bolts through the top here and have washers to kind of offset it again to make it look good and stand out. So feed the bolts through the holes here, through the washers, and simply install the nut and washer on the underside. I'm going to rotate to help reach a little bit easier here. One. And the other. There we go. All right, so if you ordered the rear support arm here, I'm going to cut to the video now with the fixed frame where I explain the assembly of the actual back arm here, and then we'll come back with how to actually attach it to the frame. So here's obviously a very long top support piece and our handle at the top here. Also, obviously you'll have this bracket, as well as a smaller bracket and a larger bracket here for the rollers. So going to start here with the smaller bracket. So we're going to take 2 of the 1 1/4 bolts just like we had before, 2 washers, 2 nuts, and this will be all out of your support bag. I use a lot of the same parts, so if you have these all just laid out, it's not really a problem. I'm going to take these, load them in here, washer, washer, and then just make sure you square it up. All right, bracket there. Oh, and before I go any further, shouldn't forget these plastic caps that you have here go in each end of the top piece here and in the ends of your frame. So I didn't put this one in so I could demonstrate. You can really just set these in and whack them with literally anything or press down on them. You can use a hammer, you can just press them into the table. So I'll give an example here. If I put this down here and then just press, and there you go, completely flat, pushed into the end, no problem. So, like I said, 4 of those, 2 in here, 2 in here to plug the ends up and give it just a cleaner finish. Anyway, back to the bracket. So we got our lower one in here. This middle one here is for if you use the, if you have the extension piece ordered separately, your lower bracket will go into here because your upper bracket will mount in the extension. That's how we raise the roller up more. So do not use this middle one if you don't have the extension. We're going to use the lower of the top 2 for this larger bracket here. The top bracket, we're going to have to do something similar for the roller as we did on the bottom. So I'm going to start by putting these in, and I'm going to leave them kind of loose, and I'll show you what I mean. Feed those through. All right, so I've left the top bracket a little loose here. And the reason for that is, again, because these rollers are not spring loaded, Going to take our last little plastic washer here, feed it on the bottom roller, or the part of the roller we're going to put in. You can put on either side. We're going to feed the bottom part of the roller into this hole here. And then for the top, you're going to have to bend the bracket up a little bit while it's loose to get the roller in, and then tighten down these nuts on this bracket to then hold it in place. And just make sure you square it up. And tighten down. So now your roller is in the two brackets with the plastic washer on the bottom part here. And now we'll put in the top with you've already got your two plastic pieces on. Take two of the longer screws. These are 2 1/4 inches if I remember right. Feed those through and then washer nut, washer nut. All right, now you have your entire top design complete here, and now we need to attach it to the base. So the setup here is actually largely similar to the fixed frame, with the addition being this bracket here that goes underneath. So you can see your hinge here that has 2 holes, or 2 bolts on either side to mount the hinge to the top, which are these 2 holes in the frame here. This hinge with the 2 holes here will mount in, as you can see, so this is obviously just a finished product versus where you start. This bracket mounts underneath like this. And what this does here, this brace provides support for when you lean the arm back here, right? It'll press into the bottom of this. So you're gonna stick it under here when you attach the bolts, or when you bolt the hinge to the base. And those will be in your support kit. There will be these shorter bolts that'll be in your support kit. So you'll stick them through here, just like that, and you'll mount the hinge on top of here to get it to stick through, and then bolts through the top of the hinge, just like shown in the fixed frame video. And the last thing to note is this hole here will then act as your locking point. So you'll feed a bolt through the bottom. So this bolt here is your locking point. So you can see the base is under here. So you'll feed the bolt through the inside, stick it through the frame, and then lock it back here. So you'll have 1, 2, 3 bolts that are attaching the rear support arm to the base here. So this hinge, you can kind of do this 2 different ways, really your preference. You can either attach the hinge to the base first, or attach the hinge, or sorry, not to the base, attach the hinge to the support arm or to the base and then mount it. Either way, it doesn't matter, whatever your preference is, they still have to go through the same 4 holes in the hinge. I'm gonna do it to the base here. So get 1 1/4 inch bolts. Feed these through here, put that on top. You could feed these bolts through either way if you wanted it to look different, doesn't really matter. Tighten it down. And then what's going to happen is this longer bolt here is going to feed through the bottom here, right? And it's going to go through the support once we line it up here. And we're going to have 2 bolts through the hinge that connect to support as well. So you're going to have 3 points here that'll go through. We got to pull this one out to start with. Can pick up our support arm, line up the 2 holes here. Get those through, And I typically lean forward a bit just to hold it with my head here. Get those kind of loosely on. We straighten it upright, feed our bottom bolt through. Nut and washer on everything. Hand tighten it all up. And there you have it.